Alright. All happy families are alike, Tolstoy told us, and each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. But I bet the farm that no family has ever been as unhappy in as many ways as the Westons of August, Osage County. This is a quote from Charles Isherwood in his New York Times review of August, Osage County, published on December 5th, 2007. I chose this quote because out of every quote I found for the show, I felt that one best summed up the show in its entirety. Today, I will be talking to you about 3 different themes found in August, Osage County. To prepare for this speech, I read the play and reviews of the play. The 3 themes we will be discussing today are relationships with parents, the American family, and addiction. To begin, let's look at the theme of our relationships with our parents. My first piece of evidence comes from a review done by Lily Janiak on September 14th, 2016 for SF Gate. We now live in a world where children, having long departed the family homestead, only visit. Ours is a society, the play attests, that will one day be defined by our failure to care for, or to simply be with, our elders, as they sicken and near the end of life. Not that those elders make it easy or even possible to do so. I like this quote because it ignites an inner conflict within you about the relationship you have with your parents. You always want to be with them and see them, yet you know that you need to be your own person. I feel like this relates to many of us in this room, as with most of us wanting to go into show business, we'll have to move away from Nebraska eventually. We see the Weston sisters and their family all coming back to help their mother deal with the disappearance and the death of their father. Yet what truly happens is a reigniting of old flames and the start of new blazes of arguments. I can relate this to having started a conversation or making a joke with my parents about something small, and then all of a sudden I'm arguing with them about something that happened in middle school, as I think we all can. My next piece of evidence comes from a review done by Jay Ranger in September 10th, 2009, for the Hollywood Reporter. Words are hard. Violet tells a revealing story late in the play about how her own mother once played a terrible trick on her when she was an adolescent and laughed about it for days. This is the only real explanation we're offered as to the source of Violet's bitterness and constant undermining of her children's confidence and hopes, traits shared not so incidentally with Violet's acid-tongued sister Maddie Faye. I chose this quote because it helps illustrate how much of an impact our parents have on us. They are one of the biggest deciding factors in our lives, from how they treat us to what they tell us is right or wrong. They have a large impact on who we are as adults. My last piece of evidence comes from the play itself. In Act 3, Scene 5, Violet is arguing with Barbara about whether or not she could have saved Beverly from his fate. She says, "You had better understand this, you smug little ingrate. There is at least one reason Beverly killed himself, and that's you. Think there's any way he would have done what he did if you were still here? No. Just him and me, here in this house, in the dark, left to ourselves, abandoned, wasted lifetimes devoted to your care and comfort. So stick that knife of judgment in me, go ahead, but make no mistake, his blood is just as much on your hands as it is on mine." I chose this quote because while it relates to my first point about leaving home, it also relates to how insane some people's relationships are with their parents. Violet and Barbara are arguing about who is responsible for the death of Beverly, yet the entire point of coming back home was for Barbara to help comfort her mother. Some parents and children truly cannot get along, and that is very obviously shown in this example. Now that I've presented my evidence for this point, I'd like to pose a question for our dialogue later. Who do you think is more control in the parental relationship, the parent or the child? Does this always stay true, or does it change over time? The next point I'd like to talk about is the American family. My first piece of evidence comes from a review of the play written by Stephen Oxman on July 9th, 2007 for Variety. In it, Oxman talks about the secondary events happening throughout the play. They mostly involve the relationships formed by daughters in their relentlessly unsuccessful efforts at idealized family, Barbara's failing marriage to Bill and her difficulties with her pot-smoking teenage daughter, Karen's naive hopefulness at the seeming perfection of her new fiancé, and Ivy's secret romance, with twists and turns at calibrated intervals to devastating effect. I chose this quote because it helps illustrate how much this family deviates from the standard American family. We often see the perfect family as a group that always loves and cares for each other and very rarely argues. It is very impressive of the entire play that this family is anything but that. My next piece of evidence comes from a review of the play done by Jay Ranger on September 10th, 2009 for The Hollywood Reporter. August illustrates that just when we thought there was nothing further to say about a dysfunctional American family in the theater, the genre is anything but exhausted in the hands of a playwright with talent, nerve, and something to say. I like this quote because it directly mentions the dysfunctionality of this family. Almost every review of the play or interview done with the playwright mentions this sense of family that doesn't blend, which goes directly against what we think of as the perfect American family. My last piece of evidence comes from a review done by Charles McNulty on September 10th, 2009 for the Los Angeles Times. Fortunately, Americans love their doom-laden family dramas. The more damaged and demented, the better. Our most cherished classics are a series of psychiatric case studies, with the Tyrones of Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey in the Night, the Wingfields of Tennessee Williams's The Glass Menagerie, and the Lomans of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. constituting not just a caravan of indelible characters, but a national heritage of suffering rooted in false promises and dashed dreams. This is probably my favorite quote I've ever found in an assignment I've ever done. I love this quote because it so accurately depicts examples of dysfunctional families and why we love them. We've been given this idea of what the perfect family should be, yet we know that not every family is perfect, including our own. Seeing these examples of dysfunctional families in media helps comfort us that our problems are validated from others. With these bits of evidence in mind, I'd like to pose a question for our dialogue later. Is there really such thing as a perfect American family? And what do you think defines a perfect family? Last thing we'll be talking about today is addiction. My first piece of evidence comes from a review done by Jay Reiner on September 10th, 2009 for The Hollywood Reporter. Violet pops pills like jelly beans in her adult state and is capable of turning on her children like an animal eager to devour its young. The daughters, caught in the coils of the past and their natural instincts, keep coming back for more punishment, and Mama obliges. I like this quote because while also providing some great imagery, it also helps show how this addiction is causing Violet's relationship with her family to deteriorate. It's forcing her in this aggressive state of mind towards her family that is only trying to help her. My next piece of evidence comes from the play itself. In Act 2, Scene 1, Barbara confronts Violet about what she is, and Violet certainly has an answer. That is the truth. That's what I'm getting at. Everybody listen. I am a drug addict. I'm addicted to drugs, pills, especially downers. You see these little blue babies? These are my best fucking friends, and they never let me down. Try to get them away from me, and I'll eat you alive. I like this quote because not only do we get a confession, which is rare, but we see how Violet thinks about what she is. She believes that there is nothing wrong with it, and she finds comfort in it. This is common to find comfort in things you're addicted to, and her thinking that these pills are the only way to feel good just add to her delusion and mayhem. My last piece of evidence comes from the play itself. In the prologue scene between Beverly and Joanna, Beverly explains his wife's addiction to the pills she takes and how they try to get her unhooked. Violet, my wife, doesn't believe she needs treatment for her habit. She has been down that road once before and came out of it clean as a whistle, then chose for herself this reality instead. This quote helps convey the sad truth that even though some people get treatment and try to break themselves of this habit, they return to it just as easily as they started, whether it is by choice or the necessity to feel good again. Many people who try to quit find they can't and often relapse. With these points about addiction in mind, I'd like to pose the last question to consider in our dialogue. What is the most effective way to get treatment for drug addiction and the pain that follows? Can anyone ever truly be cured? Now that I've presented these themes and questions, I'd like to invite all of you to participate in a dialogue about these things.